Hello, everybody. Glad you're all with us, especially if you're joining us from home at some other time and you're just listening to our conversation. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a prayer. So would you pray with me? God, we are grateful for the time together, this time where we get to discuss this work of fiction by C.S. Lewis that gives us some insights into you, into ourselves, and ultimately into how we can better live as your disciples in this world. I pray that our conversation and the thoughts and intentions of our hearts are glorifying to you in this time. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
This week we read chapters 5 and 6, and I just want to jump us off with what from the reading this week was most memorable for you? Like, what stands out in your memory?
The water, the water that is just weird, and then you realize it's a great big giant, or whatever, or it's something different. It's a being.
Yeah, the waterfall.
Yeah, so surprise. Yeah.
It's always interesting the things that writers insert, and in descriptions. I'm fascinated by what they do, but the big ghost, he was wearing gaiters. I had to look it up.
Yeah.
I remember my dad talking about the National Guard when he was in it, which was, he was born in 1910. So, and they were called spats or something like that. They're just cloth coverings came over the shoes. But it was just interesting. The writer put that in there.
Yeah.
That he was wearing gaiters.
Spats were formal. Yeah.
Okay.
Formal wear.
Details.
What'd you say, Kathy?
I said details.
Yeah, the details.
Yeah.
But their conversation in chapter 5 I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
When the ghost, he's not sure where he is, where he's been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll spend some time talking about that ghost and that conversation, because that's the bulk of chapter 5. Joey or Jen, what stands out to you?
We're working on unmuting there.
Yeah.
There's a pattern forming, and this is what's sticking out to me, of each ghost, as he's starting to refer to them as being very self-unaware of the one thing. Jen and I kind of talked about this a little bit, just a singular thing that each spirit, or as they're kind of making that distinction between the two, the spirit asks them, just, this is the one thing, and they won't let go of it. And it's funny, it's still playing into the whole archetype thing. You have the intellectual who just refuses to allow the end of intellect, or to find the end of the intellect, right? To let the answers come to the questions. And in chapter 4 with the big guy, the big ghost, right? Who just refused to let go of his inner sense of control and anger, while trying to justify, and both of them tried to justify their means. I did what I did because I'm a good man, or I do what I do because I'm an intellectual, and if I don't have the questions, then then there's no reason to be who I am. And that's what's just sticking out to me, of this holding on to what they felt as self-defining characteristics. In both cases, what they probably both felt is self-righteousness. So
I get frustrated with the ghosts, because they all have this one thing that they want, like he was saying, and they won't give it up. And it's one of those, like, as an outsider reading it, I'm going, you're already dead. You can't get any better unless you take this one thing. That's not a hard thing to do. Just one simple task, just do it, and you could have so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that pattern will continue, obviously. But thanks everybody for Kathy. You said details, but I don't know if you were referring to what Dreama was saying or not. What stands out to you so far in this?
I was thinking the same as her, that it's frustrating. These people just want to hold on to something. They just don't seem to want to give in. That's kind of what I got out of what I read today. Now I'm a little behind. I read 5 and 6, but I'm a little behind on what happened before that.
That's
So,
okay. Okay, well, so let's talk about chapter 5 a little bit. I love how it starts. It starts where he hears a sound and he looks around and he sees these lions and he's like, I'm gonna go away. I know what the grass is feeling like. I can only imagine this. On top of the fact that they're lions and he remembers what lions do on Earth. But they're just playing. Like they're just rolling around in the grass playing and let's see, playing some solemn romp. Their manes looked as if they'd just been dipped in the river whose noise I could hear close at hand. They're just animals at play.
Well, I kept thinking there's going to be some significance about lions, the mention of lions, because, you see statues of lions and pictures of lions, back in the day, Daniel in the lion's den. So I'm thinking, it might just be as simple as they were playing. And he just used that.
Yeah.
The frustration to me is you presume some of these things, if not most of them, are symbolic, allegorical, and so forth. But you don't get in the instance of, for example, of the lions. If anybody's guess, it could pertain to this or that and the other. I presume in chapter 83 they come in at the end. To let us know what it is, Metro Golden Mare or something like that. So, but anyway, the frustration to me is not that the people won't do this, that, and the other, because it is a work of fiction. But what's frustrating is not knowing what these things stand for. And that's the frustrating. And it continues. Frustration continues.
But, and I hear that. And I think the only thing I can think about is the reason these lions are in here is Lewis is trying to show that in this world, the things that are of that world, they're natural. They belong there. They're just playing. They're having fun. This is their place. Like he talks about the bird that lands a couple chapters ago, and the dust and the dew spatters and it just goes all over. He wishes he could do that. I think that's kind of what's going on. And Lewis is just showing that the things that belong in the bright land truly do belong. Like,
I kind of get the impression that it's just a mechanism to help us understand that God created these things on earth, and here in what lies to be the outskirts of perfection, they still exist. That God created them, and we have our tainted, some would say perverted version of it through sin and separation. But here we are through the lens of the author again, seeing what could be perfect creation. That lions romping and playing, they're not hunting, they're not destroying. There's things that we would fear, but they're not to be feared in this context. And that theme for me carried on into chapter 6, where we observe the man running around. I don't want to jump the gun too much, but where he's running and ducking, and then eventually the apple falls on his head. And we now have understanding of that the context of this solid form of creation is going to hurt him when an apple falls on his head, not like it would to us, but like dropping a cinder block on your head. So to me it feels like there's just this thread of God intended everything that we knew to be righteous and pure and correct, and then through fall, through sin, it went away, and now he's re-experiencing it in its truest form. I know that I may be reading too much into it, but that's kind of what I see.
Yeah, I think I can go with that. It's well, let's move on a little bit. He goes looking for the river. No, Lee, you have something you want to ask?
Just is this? I'm just wading through chapter 9, so Do we ever hear anything else from the Lions?
I don't know.
Otherwise, it's an extraneous kind of thing in there. I'm glad Joey got a message from there, you know. I missed the message, but anyway, okay, go ahead.
This is why we discuss things in a group so that we can hear other people's perspectives, because not all of us are going to think the same. And that is awesome. So he moves into this conversation. One of the bright people is having a conversation with the ghost. And if I'm totally transparent about this, this is the ghost that I identify with most. He's the philosopher. He's the Episcopal priest who loves to ask the questions. And there's the danger in that you learn to love the questions more than seeking the answers. And I mean, that's the whole conversation kind of goes around that way. And it's that I see this in this story is that C.S. Lewis is shining a light saying questions are meant for answers. Thirst is meant for drink. You don't just sort of go halfway and just say, well, I don't need the answer. I mean, he comes right out and says the journey is better than the destination, which I've heard that. I've said that. And in some ways that's true, but I think you journey so that you can have a destination. Anyway, River's making Baxter bark. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay. I was actually wondering what your take would be on this chapter, because I thought of you instantly. I'm like, CJ would describe himself as intellectual, so I just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I love philosophy. I love asking the questions, and sometimes I love to ask the questions just to ask the questions, to follow that train of thought. But I think that's the thing, is to follow the train of thought so that I can come to whatever the end result would be. Whereas this person would just rather go in circles and continue to ask the questions. One of the things that stood out to me about this character is he doesn't seem to think, he just doesn't seem to know that he's died. Because he has, I think Lee or Dreama, one of you might have said that he just has no clue where he's at. He just goes on doing his thing. I don't know. One of you all said that already.
Yeah, I felt that way.
Is he the one that thinks of the gray town as heaven? I forgot which one he would.
He's the one that on the bus said that it's not a dusk, it's a dawn. He's waiting for the sun to rise so the spirit can be enlightened. He thinks that the gray town is a spiritual place, just as the place where he's at now, which is the physical, the bright place.
Yeah.
I guess if you want to differentiate them, the gray town and the bright place would be a good way to differentiate the two.
Because he's in his element, he's still in his element of, in his little group of discussing these philosophical things. And as I liked that Joey said, the things that give meaning. The word when before he said it, I was thinking of raison d'etre. It's his reason for being, and he's not going to give that up.
Yeah. So what do you think his reason for being is? And this might be a part of the conversation that will help us get insight into this character.
To avoid dealing with reality.
Okay.
If
So-
you look at what the angel, sorry, if you listen to what the angel or the spirit says, he pretty much calls him out that his reason for being is fame, that the decisions he made, the works that he wrote, his stances he took as a priest, the lines he drew or lines he crossed, was all for his own notoriety. So from his perspective, he gets called out on that, but he argues very much against it and tries to justify that his stance was really just the question. He needed to know what the next question was.
No, I think he's had a lofty view of himself.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, and I think along the lines of fame, is he needs to be needed.
Mhm.
He needs people to talk to give him he needs an audience. I guess that might be the better way to put it, is he needs an audience.
Adulation, perchance. Adulation.
Yeah, because he says, I need you to give me some guarantees, and he's like, the bright person says, you won't be needed. In fact, you won't have anything to offer. Just come and discover the truth.
We've been watching a lot of British shows, BritBox lately, and the dialogue that Lewis is giving him sounds just like a Brit talking to me.
Hmm.
So when I read it, that's what I hear in my voice. But I'm thinking of Lewis and where he lived, it would just be natural for him to write it the way someone would speak, from Britain.
One
Yeah.
of the things that I thought about relative to this was there are many different forms, but this is one way of control, one means of exercising control. And I don't know if it's all control, but in his instance, when he would say, "Yes, my dear boy," he's looking down on the other folks. And of course, "Yes, right, no boy, yes," that kind of thing. That's how I saw it. I heard it too. But I think about all of these in terms of the idea of control. How much control are they exercising through what later on the wimpy kind of guy and so forth.
Well, Dick called him an apostate,
Yeah.
because he gave up.
Well, and not just gave up, but in the end, just didn't believe.
And, yeah,
They gave him a bishopric, if I'm remembering correctly. And here's a bishop who no longer believes the things of the faith, but still has the fame and the notoriety. And that's his thing. He just wants, like Joey, you said that he just wants to have that fame. He wants to have that notoriety. He wants to have that position of power.
but Dick says, "Don't you know? You were sent there because you were an apostate." It's like he doesn't get it.
Right.
And as you progress through their dialogue, the further into the chapter you get, especially close to the end, the Spirit stumps him, and he gets him into a sentence, and then he gets about halfway through the thought, and then he stops, and he hesitates, and he thinks, and then he goes, "Well, he doesn't finish the thought." And like there's this almost like this turning point where he realizes he's worked himself into a corner. And then all of a sudden, to get out of that corner, he just starts postulating this whole theory about, if Jesus hadn't died on the cross, he would have matured to the same point that he is, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. But fun to read, but fun in that frustrating, how could you ever, imagine that level of vanity in your own scope, to think that Jesus really just needed to go down the same road he went down to really understand his full potential. So that was my take on that. But.
One of the things that I thought about, I guess the reason I thought of control there is because he just dominated conversation. He would tolerate a little bit from the other fellow, the angel, but beyond that, he just dominated it, and the fellow couldn't get a word in edgewise. So.
Well, it was interesting that when in their discussion, Dick was saying, when we were in college, we wrote papers, we got an applause. But in the end, he said, when did we put up one moment's real resistance to the loss of our faith? I thought that was an interesting statement.
Yeah. Kathy or Jen, any thoughts on this character or this part of this conversation?
It seemed to me that the Spirit was just frustrated with the whole interaction. Like he even starts out in the ghost tells him, "Oh, you were wrong, weren't you? There is no heaven and hell." And he's like, "Where do you think you've been? Like, what do you think is going on?" Just like almost talking to, I don't know, an idiot almost. Like, just What are you thinking?
Yeah. And we've had those sort of conversations, like, are we having the same conversation? Kathy, any thoughts?
It was
All right, well, let's move on. As the story continues on, we move on from the apostate the Episcopal ghost. I think C.S. Lewis calls him out there and labels him Episcopal on purpose, by the way.
Okay.
But I think that label of the apostate can be to any clergyman who is more obsessed with fame fame and importance.
Does he, with so many things from C.S. Lewis, he brings in like his mentor. Is this, you think, directed at a real person, a similar? Okay, I wondered about that.
If I remember, we don't get there in chapter 6. I think he shows up in chapter 7, but
Okay,
I'm pretty sure the mentor actually gives his name, and you can look up biographical details about that person because C.S. Lewis never actually met him in life. But I'm jumping ahead now. Chapter 6 is where he encounters the river, and I think it's another aspect of the natural in that space and how he doesn't belong there yet.
Mhm.
Because he knows that it's physical and it's solid, so he puts one foot out and touches it, but it doesn't quite click to him that it's not a stagnant stream, it's rapidly flowing. And so I don't know about you, but when I read these words, actually when I hear them, because I'm listening to the book on Audible this time, I see him get swept around, and it's sort of like a Bugs Bunny kind of thing where he just tumbles head over heels over and over on the river. That's how I imagine it. But
Mhm.
what was it about this scene with the river that connected with you, or that helped you begin to contextualize the world, I guess?
Kind of felt to me a continuation of the idea that he doesn't belong. He is trying to experience the world in the way that he sees the lions and the birds and the trees and the wind interacting together and all the things he knows to be real. You step in dew, you leave a footprint. You know, you step into grass, you see the blades bend over, and none of those things have happened. And they come to the point where saying stepping on the grass hurts, and he makes the point. He stays on the river, trying to walk on the river because it doesn't hurt as bad. But he's realizing his interactions with this physical space, he is not part of it. He is an outsider, an alien. He is not conditioned or ready to be part of it. And there's allusions throughout, especially this chapter, about learning to eat the apples and learning to walk in the grass, and that it's will come to you. But it's really, I don't know, the first couple of pages of chapter 6 drove home to me his alienness, his foreignness to this space, where he's interacting, but he doesn't belong, and he's not experiencing it truly. So
Yeah, the need for growth kind of thing.
not until you mentioned the tumbling and so forth, to think of this as a metaphor of the Christian's journey, and then I'm thinking about, is it the Christian's journey through life, or is this the Christian's journey to finally trying to make it to heaven through all that we go through on earth? I don't know, but in terms of tumbling and so forth, I was wondering about that, just the vicissitudes of life to get to heaven.
I think that if you want to stretch the analogy, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say this is similar to what our experience of life is. I'm not sure that was C.S. Lewis' intention, but I can see that pattern being in it, where you encounter people who help you see and become, see the kingdom of heaven and become more real along the way. And that life is painful in this existence. And I mean, you can go into scripture and talk, like, I see through a shadow, or I see through a veil, but dimly, kind of thing.
Mhm.
I think some of that is, I think, intentional from C.S. Lewis, but I don't know that I would go there. I can see it as an interpretation.
How do you interpret it?
I see this as as a story to help us understand God's grace and our humanity and the relationship between the two. That's if I was to sum up the entire book, that would be it.
You're talking about a broad interpretation now of the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get to the hawthorn bush and then the apple.
Yeah, so let's talk about that waterfall a little bit first, because
I was gonna say, we haven't finished with the water yet. Yeah.
yeah, one of you brought that up early on, is that's what stood out to you. So the waterfall, and he says something about his senses. I can't find it right now, but he talks about almost like his senses, like he can take in the entire waterfall all at once. And that's not something he would have experienced or been able to do on Earth. Oh, here it is. On Earth, such a waterfall could not have been perceived at all as a whole. It was too big. But in this space, in this place, he's able to perceive the entirety of this waterfall all at the same time.
He said
So-
the sound would have been a terror for 20 miles.
Yeah. I've been near some pretty loud waterfalls. I understand that.
But, you know,
All of his descriptions that he keeps contrasting with, like, it should be like he said, terror for 20 miles, right? But he says it's like a group of giants laughing. You know, there's this undergirding of everything has a joyous nature to it, or a peaceful happiness. There's my dog, by the way, being crazy. You know, but he keeps coming back to that idea with several things, you know, like the size of the tree and the apples and everything should be, something's wrong, but it just seems right.
Yeah.
I think that's cool that he keeps drawing that attention.
and yet in this thing, and for the water, that's why I'm trying to figure what kind of, what's the metaphor? He's concerned, he's afraid here, or about this thing. The sizes is immense, and, you know, it's like it's threatening to him, yet he's drawn to it. So is this salvation, or is this heaven, or something like that anyway? Water, first of all, first thing I think about is baptism, you know, that's just relationship to baptism, but I don't think that's either.
I don't know that everything has to have a metaphor to it. The way I see it is this place is larger than life. And so coming here as a ghost, as you know, when everything hurts, it's not like being on Earth where we don't even think about stepping on the grass, or, you know, there are large waterfalls, but, you know, this one seems to be incredibly massive. You know, I think it's just saying this is bigger than you, and you can be a part of it if you choose.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stands out to it for me, stands out to me in that regard also is the creation is pouring itself out in existence in praise for God. And I think that's the image I have for this waterfall, because we get back and it's like a giant pouring water out. And I think that's a part of it also, is you don't think of creation as being a thing in the sense of as a living organism. But it exists. And I mean, if you don't go to scripture, even the rocks will cry out if the people are quiet and praise God. Paul talks about creation groans in eager expectation, waiting for the children of God to be revealed. And so I think if you need to put a meaning to it, the meaning is that creation is alive in this place. And even in this chapter, it said, even the grass would delight to teach you how to eat the apple. And so I think those sort of themes connect to each other in that. Is that making sense, Lee?
Well, yeah. I was just distracted. It seems like he spent an awful lot of time and a lot of visual imagery, but visual in terms of talking about colors and shapes and such, about the fall, Spends a lot of time talking about that, and it's just a description. It's not much, not for me.
Probably a robot.
One of us can hear on the phone in this household, so.
Yeah, I understand. Well, do we want to talk about the waterfall anymore, or do we want to move to the ghost hiding in the hawthorn bush?
Is this Ike? Is this Ike?
I don't know if it's Ike or not. I think, yeah, the big ghost called him Ike. So yes, it's Ike.
Okay.
So this is the businessman that was sitting next to our main character on the bus. This is the guy who's going to bring stuff from the bright lands down into the gray town, so he can create some sort of community to protect from them, whatever them are. Do you remember that conversation from the bus? That's this guy
Yeah.
So this is his attempt at going to collect something. He sneaks along fearfully, like he's not allowed to take. And then,
it's collecting the apples.
yeah, and then he goes to collect the apples. They all fall on him, like Joey, you said it, like 10 tons of bricks just falls on him. And I stay there and watch. I mean, the main character, stays there to watch and say, "Oh, that would really hurt. I'm gonna see if he's okay," kind of thing. And then he gets up after a while and he tries to collect the apples, and then finally is able to actually pick one up and carry it away, which says something. I mean, I think he's engaging with that reality and valuing it in such a way that he's grown real enough to be able to pick up one of those apples. Any thoughts up to that point in the story?
Well, I don't know. Apples go back to Adam and Eve.
From a Western
The
standpoint,
apple caused the apple, not the cause the fall. The apple was part of it. And maybe the apple represented sin or whatever.
I get in this sense, I would say the apple represents greed, but I mean, if it's not
Okay,
represent anything,
our human nature. Okay, yeah, all right.
this guy's greed because he's going to go and use it to create need and community around it.
So I looked at it differently. Maybe I'm wrong, but I was thinking that he took golden apples were a value. This is a great value.
Yeah.
And he was trying to take them.
Mhm.
But you can't take anything with you.
Right. Well, and that's what the waterfall says, right?
Mhm.
Oh,
I don't know about you guys, but when I got to that point in the Audible book, the reader just takes their voice. It goes, and it booms. It goes, "Fool!" I was like, "Oh wow, I never read that word in that way, but it makes sense to hear it in like a booming voice."
Mhm.
I'm gonna be quiet now. You all talk about this part.
Well, just before that, he tried to lift a leaf and he could hardly do that. He was,
Yeah, that was our main character. He remembers trying to pick up the leaf and trying to break the stem of the flower and how hard that was.
I found there was some humor buried in this chapter, just from our observer watching him sneak from bush to bush and tree to tree, and eventually getting sandwiched between two lily stalks, I think is what it was, and the wind is blowing these things together, and he's not able to move them, so he's sandwiched between two things that should never, pin you down. And then that to me, that was, I don't know if it was an attempt at humor. I found it funny. But when the apples fell and hit him, and his reaction was, "I'm going to get as many of these together as I can." And then the author just keeps saying, "Oh, well, okay." Then he realized he couldn't take all of them, so he would take some of them. Well, then he couldn't take some of them, so he would take the biggest one. Well, he couldn't take the biggest one because that just wasn't working. He took the smallest one, and just that thread of commentary that just went through that section. I mean, I thought it was humorous the whole time, but it also spoke to me of Ike's resolve to achieve the thing that he has told us he was there to do. So he fought for his right to get to that waterfall and to get under that tree, and he fought through being pinned under flowers that were blowing in the wind. And life or death for him. He could have been crushed in that moment. Apples falling on his head, to try to sneak away with his. There was, how did he say it? Last page of chapter 7. He set out on his own Via Dolorosa to the bus, carrying his torture. It was more work to try to take it than it was just to try to be in that space and enjoy it. And then the waterfall turns out to be an angel, booming down at him,
Yeah.
You know, relatively bluntly, you fool, put it down, just
Yeah.
stay and I'll teach you. And he continues to trudge off, and you fool, you know, just over and over again. So I know it was funny to me,
Yeah.
this whole
Yeah.
sequence of events, while still being very visceral and very real. It just seemed a little moment of reprieve. We had two very solemn and deep encounters where we delve into the sin of murder in the heart and forgiveness and all the stuff there, and then the intellectual side of things where we tend to feel like our own thoughts are right. Those are really deep and solemn moments. Then we get this little reprieve into the world and what's happening in this guy who's not interacting with it the way we think it should be interacted with.
But it's a strong picture of the persistence that greed will drive you to, the strength of greed. And I would expand that to talk about what the world offers for whatever the world offers, if we love that so much.
There was a man in the news today that cashed a $250 check at the bank, but the teller, this was local, the teller gave him $2,500 and he knew it, and he immediately went out and spent it. And police caught him, and he's in jail now with a felony conviction. But the greed, the immediate greed was what got me. I mean, he would know what 250 felt like in an envelope compared to 2,500. So, you know, he probably knew before he left the lot that he had more than he should.
Any information with the teller? That what happened to her?
But the greed just got him.
I think so. The words Via Dolorosa, for those of you who don't know, Via Dolorosa is Jesus' journey to the cross.
Right.
So this C.S. Lewis calling it that, I think, points us to the excruciating nature of what this guy is going through, just to experience, to get this little piece of reality. And I think, I know he does that on purpose because he wrote it, but I think that can lead us to thoughts about the process of becoming real, the process of valuing something so much that you're willing to suffer and die for it, even if your reason for it is wrong.
I'm lumping more things together than just greed, but essentially they are things that are attractive to us in general. I think I mentioned this on one of the Zooms we had not too long ago. We all have attractions to which we're better off not giving in. Everybody has that. And more broadly, whatever these attractions are, whether it be gold in his instance, and money and so forth, whatever it is, it can be, it can overpower us, and we become a prisoner to our lust, essentially.
Yeah.
And then I have a blank page here.
Yeah, we're just about done with this, and well, we're just about done time-wise too. So, so the voice that says "fool, put it down." You cannot take it back. There's not room for it in hell. That this part of it right here is what Lewis was talking about in the introduction of the preface. I don't remember what it was called, but about how you can't take any piece of heaven with you into hell. And I think that's what you were saying, Kathy, is you can't take it with you. Is there's things that are just, they can't go together. And I think that's part of what we're seeing here, is that the things of the bright realm won't fit in the shadow, in the gray town.
You mean there's a great divorce between them?
Yeah, perhaps, you know? Yeah. And I think that's part of what Jen, I think you were talking about, is that there's this natural state of things that where they don't belong together, but they're but he's in the process of becoming real and experiencing that. I don't know if maybe you weren't saying that, but I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you the credit for it anyway. And it's just how everything in creation, everything there would be happy to teach him to encounter that reality as it's meant to be, if he'll just take the opportunity. And
I
that's,
see things in this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I mean, I'm seeing things as we're going along in here. I may have read up a little bit into chapter 9, but it's nothing has changed my thinking. But I think it's for us to think about is what we think about heaven versus we're looking at what C.S. Lewis thinks about heaven. He may have had one point, but he's talking about, I presume, some of the things that he thinks what heaven is like or could be afterwards and so forth. And some things are very instructive in terms of what he thinks about. And then I compare it to what I believe is quite different. But it doesn't change what I believe at all. But it's interesting to see what he thinks about. I do like his other books a lot better. Let's put it like that.
But you like his nonfiction books a lot better. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yeah, most nonfiction books that I would read, that yes is the answer.
I think no, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say this: the invitation to the ghost is to stay, to abide. Just stay here. You value that thing so much. Stay here.
Mhm.
And I think that's sort of the theme for the Bright Realm. The Bright Realm, I mean, there's a bus that goes to the Gray Town to bring people, to invite them to stay and become real. And then there's bright people who come and meet the ghostly people at the bus stop to help them learn what it is to become real. And I think what if we need a message in this, it's God's continued determination that all would be with God in paradise. I mean, if this is heaven, then that's the goal, is for God to bring people to be with God and in paradise. And I think one of the things that may be tripping you up a little bit on it, Lee, as far as this, if this is Lewis's idea of heaven, is philosophers might refer to this, and Lewis, I imagine, would have, as ultimate reality, not necessarily heaven. He might not have used the word heaven because that word comes with a whole bunch of baggage, theological baggage and cultural baggage. But ultimate reality seems to be the picture he is drawing for us of this space.
I think it's worth noting on that with that in mind, the angels comment, the waterfall angels comment to, it doesn't fit, this apple won't fit in the Gray Town. It's worth contrasting that it won't fit there, but you can fit here. Mm-hmm. That it's not said in those words, but it's the implication. You can't take anything from here or there, but we are more than willing to take everything from there and bring it here. It just has to be, there's that acceptance of it. I think I want to see how that unpacks as we read some more.
Yeah. And that's a great note for us to end on tonight. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all for discussion and reading and your insights. I talked more tonight than I wanted to, so I apologize for that. But
No, thank you.
But let me close us in prayer, and then we'll disperse. God, thank you for creation and for creativity and for the ways that you draw us unto yourself. We thank you for the ways that your Spirit works within us, enlivening us and making us real, so that we can set foot in your land and bend the grass in your land and be full participants of your love and nature. As we go forth, be Be with us in such a way that we experience your presence, that we have your joy and see you around us, and that we may join in your work in our communities. Through your son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, everybody. God bless you.
You want this marker in